Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now throughout this whole GPU shortage situation there have been 3 graphics cards that seem to have survived inflated pricing and unavailability. Unfortunately 2 of them are pretty terrible and the other is okay at best. No matter where I look, the GT 710, 730 and GT 1030 are all available at what is usually MSRP. We took a look at the re-released GT 710 a short while ago, which aside from multi-monitor and higher resolution support performed just as terribly as it always has. So today we're revisiting the 730 and 1030 from Nvidia to see just how well they are holding up. Can either of these tide you over until that dream card of yours comes back into stock? Well, first up it's Battlefield 5 and the GT 1030. This particularly demanding single player level is representative of sort of a worst case scenario. There are some instances whereby 60 FPS is doable at 720p low here with full resolution scaling, even with the 1030. Of course 720p isn't going to be for everyone, but personally I find it fine on a small-ish monitor. If you hook your PC up to a big 1080p or 4K TV though, then you'll certainly notice the lack of overall sharpness to the image. However, switching to the 730 makes me instantly miss the 1030's performance, as we need to make even more sacrifices here to get close to just 30 FPS. 50% scaling is the best option, and even so there will be some drops as more enemies begin to fill the screen. The thing about the 730 as well is that a lot of the time it's only 15 or 20 pounds less than the 1030, making the latter seem like the obvious choice, especially given the performance differences not just seen here but throughout. Add to that the fact that the 730 that's most common on the market is the DDR3 version, and yeah, it sounds even less tempting. Black Ops Cold War is also playable on the 1030, but again, utilising 720p resolution or reducing the resolution scaling from the graphical menu is a must. We were seeing around 50 FPS here, but performance depends on the map and the game mode. There were some big drops below that, and sometimes we even saw 60 FPS if we were looking out onto an empty area or up into the sky. The GT 730 on the other hand, well, this time we had to utilise that good old resolution scale slider and turn the game way down to 480p. Even then it's a bit of a mess, not just visually of course, but in terms of frame rate. We occasionally saw 30 FPS, again in situations described beforehand, but for the most part that target of 30 FPS is going to be out of reach. And as for 60, well, that is not happening. On to Cyberpunk 2077 next, and I did wonder why I even bothered, but the end result was a little more surprising than I had initially anticipated. With the 1030 at low, we were seeing around 25 FPS, which doesn't feel totally unplayable, at least not to someone who purchased this on PS4. Yes, that's me. I bought this on PS4 on launch day as well as PC, as it was going to be a gift, but I decided against giving it away because after I read about the performance issues and tested it myself, yeah, I totally changed my mind. So the 1030 is okay, but probably not enjoyable long term. By that I mean, after about 5 minutes it starts to give you a bit of a headache. However, the 730, well, less said about that the better, to be fair. We did hit 10 FPS though. This is actually 9 FPS more than I thought we'd get. Reducing the resolution scale doesn't really seem to help here either, and you can expect a maximum of around 15 frames per second. Unless you go way down to like 240p or something from the INI file. On to Fortnite now, and thanks to the new performance mode we were seeing a very nice overall average. The performance mode API drops the settings down below what is usually the low preset, but still allows changes to the textures and view distance to be made. I actually kept the high textures here, but the view distance was set to near. There were still a few drops as reported by the 0.1% low, but overall it was a decent experience. The 730 also produced playable results thanks to the new performance mode as well. Whereas we might have seen around 30 FPS beforehand, we're now experiencing closer to 50. It's actually not uncommon for this new setting to double the FPS in some cases as well, and I've seen this myself in the case of integrated Intel graphics, for example. I'd love to see more games implement a lower than low setting, so to speak, especially at the moment when it seems that only lower end graphics cards are available. With GTA 5 we can treat ourselves to the high settings at 1080p and still average close to 60 FPS. This fan favourite has seen plenty of optimisations over the years, and even entry level GPUs like this won't struggle at all. I took a drive downtown to really test the card and overall it held up fairly nicely. The switch to the 730 also meant a switch to 720p to avoid frame dips below 30 FPS. Most of the time you'll see a frame rate figure in the 40s, creeping up over 50 and towards 60 sometimes as well, but for the most part it will definitely be playable even with this card. Again, the GDDR5 version would do better, but it's harder to find in stock, whereas, at least here in the UK, the DDR3 version is way more common. Finally then, it's Red Dead Redemption 2, which will require low settings with the 1030. I should emphasise at this point that I am of course using the GDDR5 version of the card, as the DDR4 version is not worth getting, at least in comparison. The GDDR5 1030 is the only version that should exist as far as I'm concerned. 720p and low will give us an OG Xbox One-like experience if I had to compare it to anything, though you'd still be experiencing a higher resolution most of the time on the console. We are getting a slightly higher frame rate here on PC though. You can expect a sub 20 FPS result with the DDR3 730, which although may be improved a bit by tweaking the resolution scale slider, still won't be fully playable to be fair, and even 30 FPS probably isn't much good if we end up looking at a total of about 6 pixels. But there we go, the 1030 and 730 as well as the 710 of course are at the moment the only graphics cards that I can find in stock on a lot of sites here in the UK, and ones that haven't yet seen huge price hikes on places like eBay, where they are also available in fairly large quantities. So to conclude then, here we have three cards that have survived the great GPU shortage of 2021 so far. Are they worth buying for gaming these days? Well, the 1030, yes, the 730 maybe at a stretch, and the 710 probably not. But of course it all depends on what you want to play, and I'm sure if you own either of these then you'll be able to find something that runs well on each of them. With all that said then, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.